Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. I have a very special conversation that I'd like to share with you in celebration of this full moon in Scorpio. My guest is the astrologer Sabrina Monarch. Sabrina is a dear friend. Sabrina has been my mentor for a number of years now. And earlier this year, I reached out to Sabrina to support me with a mysterious, annoying, and persistent creative block that I've been having for a while. And she guided me through a really powerful tapping session that ended up unlocking such deep layers of healing for me. So I wanted to have her over to discuss the intersection between her astrological and embodiment work. This conversation is really profound. We touched on the value of exploring modalities like EFT or emotional freedom technique alongside astrology. We also discussed what aliveness means to us, as well as how we can work with primal experiences like rage, embarrassment, resistance, along the journey of opening up to our sensitivity, embracing our intuition, and becoming more of the authentic human that we are. My hope is that this conversation sparks new realizations for you, and I hope that they nourish you throughout the rest of Taurus season and beyond. Here is my conversation with Sabrina Monarch. Welcome to the podcast, Sabrina. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm stoked.
I am so excited to have you over. I wanted to talk to you about the braiding of your astrological practice and your embodiment practice. And for context, for those listening, I received a session from you and it was so impactful to me. I reconnected with my emotional body in a way that since then has created a lot of space for me to really return to my artistic practice. And it just feels so enlivening. I know we talk a lot these days about aliveness, but talking about aliveness and experiencing aliveness are two different things. And I'm so grateful for that session because so much was unlocked. And I realized something really profound, Sabrina, which was that there is this wall that one can hit when doing a lot of spiritual practices or nervous system practices that are a little bit more oriented towards regulating. Where in that process of regulation, which is so important, sometimes we can confuse freeze for regulation. And what you really helped me do during that EFT session was touch in with this vibrant expression that I used to tap into all the time when I was just doing music. When I was mostly a performer, I was living in that state all the time, which also had its own challenges, right? Because without being able to come out of it and be more grounded, that's not really a sustainable state for me or my system at that time to live in either. In short, what I really want to express was how meaningful and impactful that session was. And the last piece I'll mention here is there's kind of this perception, this idea that astrologers or the practice of astrology doesn't lead one to embodiment. And having known you for a number of years, Sabrina, I know that to not be true because every year it feels to me like you're getting deeper into both your astrology practice and your embodiment practice. So I kind of want to have you over to ask you what your secrets are and to hear
Wow.
about your experience.
Well, this is really a profound invitation for me. Thank you. Like I'm even in the process, like this has been happening for months where I'm like, my work is changing, my nervous system is changing. I had a dream when Pluto entered Aquarius for the final time. I woke up that morning from this dream where basically it showed me that my nervous system that birthed my business had molted away and that a new nervous system was coming online. And
Wow.
it showed me, it was like weird. I was like making a social media post about it in the dream. I'm just like so Aquarian. But basically, I've been alongside astrology, I've pretty consistently had teachers and mentors and coaches, and I'm also consistently teaching and mentoring and coaching. I have Pluto in the ninth house and Jupiter in the seventh in whole sign.
Mm,
So, yeah, my whole life adventure is about like working with people, whether I'm providing or receiving these educational breakthroughs.
yeah.
And inside of practicing astrology, I've been thinking about how when I first started my practice, there weren't really people doing career astrology. It wasn't like I could just meet people who were career astrologers, but I knew I wanted to do it. And I was like young, still young, but I was younger, full of energy. And yeah, I was just doing this Aries trailblazing, like I'm going to figure this out no matter what it takes. Talked to probably dozens, if not hundreds of people about it, had
Mm,
teachers,
mm,
experimented, like some people say that they're like really picky or selective about who they work with. It's like I've experimented working with so many people and I kind of trust myself to tell, like where I can go with people and whatnot.
yeah.
But I found that becoming a professional astrologer required that I studied business. And, the way that I studied business was more maybe alternative or spiritual or embodied or unconventional. Like I learned so much about my nervous system inside of it, not just about results, but about like my business comes from my body and my being. So it's this
Mm,
whole process. So I would say that I've always been doing astrology, but I've really been multidisciplinary
yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
And another thing that I've really been thinking about is that like I'm an Aries sun, square Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn.
Mm,
And throughout my life, I've experienced myself have spurts of energy that are like really erratic, or I don't use the frame like manic or like the mental illness frame with it, but like it
mm,
is erratic, like it's
yeah.
not consistent. Every time that I really unlock energy, I'm like, this is who I am. I
Mm,
want to live here sustainably. I want to figure out how to feel safe inside of activation. I want to learn how to ground this energy.
right.
And so when I think about aliveness, I don't feel super alive all of the time. Like
Mm,
sometimes my energy, a lot of the time, my energy is really mellow. But
yeah.
I think it's given me an opportunity to play with healing modalities or experiences where what it's like to take, go into parts of my system that are in freeze and bring them online. And what it's taken to consistently, systemically bring frozen parts of myself back online so that consistently in my daily life, I'm doing things all day that maybe used to be out of range or not something that I could do without freaking out.
Mm,
And I
mm,
think that that kind of like cultivation of life force over time is so fascinating. And I think when it applies to astrology, the conceptual part of it is just a map of what's possible for you. But you
yes.
have to live that out on the ground.
Yeah.
And so if you're scared of conflict or you're scared of making decisions or, things activate you, that isn't just a philosophical breakthrough that you need to have. It's an
Mm,
embodied physical nervous system one. And like you were saying, it's not about being chill and regulated all the time. It's about holding the charge of our desire and our anger and our sadness and our grief and our ecstasy, like anything, So back to what you were saying about this like joyfulness and or you didn't use that exact word, but like aliveness and creativity and whatnot.
mhm, mhm.
Um, the last, I'll kind of like stop, wrap this part up here, but I have Cancer South Node and Capricorn North Node.
Hmm.
So it would seem like, and they're squared, however. So I actually have certain emotional states that my body and whole consciousness contracts around. And it's like, nope, we can't feel this, not
Yeah.
allowed.
Yeah.
Let's compensate for it. Let's build a mountain over it. Like let's
Hmm.
let's repress it.
Yeah.
And I've been really, really touched by the EFT training that I took with Most Jeff, where something that I really took away was that empathy, like having empathy and being able to hold and expand around any feeling state, especially the ones that are personally taboo for us.
Hmm.
Like that's all I have to do to become a better practitioner. If I have a client that comes to me that is dealing with like rage and I'm afraid of my own rage, I'm going to have to dance around that client's rage also,
Yeah.
you know, because I'm not going to be the one for them that can like open the rage with them. But if I understand my own rage, right? Not these things can be so delicate. You can't really rush them. It's like you go the pace of your own unfolding, but every personal deepening that I have into cultivating my own aliveness or empathizing with my shadow material or feeling something within myself allows me to hold better space for others.
Yeah.
And so I'm just having this really magical experience these days of thoughts, memories, triggers, if you will, come up.
Mm.
And I can just be so relaxed around something that I know I would have tried so hard to repress earlier in my life, or that
Yeah.
I would have been fucked up for the rest of the day, just
Right.
even if that memory came back up.
Right.
And it's like this ongoing process to learn how to stop being allergic to parts of our experience and ourselves. And then, yeah, so that's the trauma healing side of it, or the you know, reconciling with parts of ourselves. But on the other side of that is like all this creative opportunity of play of like, if you're okay with yourself and you have your energy online and available, then you can just go frolic in the field of possibility and it's erotic. Like that is, so yeah, I'm gonna stop there
I
with
love
that.
that. I feel so much of this Aries energy coming from what you're saying, because I've been thinking about how a lot of us came into astrology because the way that we've been taught to live our lives and the way we've been taught to relate to our desires, our creative nature, our even like our weirdo nature, right, is just not working for us anymore. If it were working, like why would we go to the birth chart? Right? Why would we kind of go excavate this symbolic language that is represented by the time we were born? Like, if you really logically think about it, like if things are totally working for you, you don't probably need this, But I think a lot of us came into it because we want to experience some sort of breakthrough, and that's kind of what I'm hearing from what you're saying, that the birth chart then becomes this map that allows you to recognize maybe where the gaps are between who you know yourself to be or your deeper essence and like what you're able to hold. And then in that gap, you kind of sought other um, training from other modalities or other experiences or people with different skills to help you kind of bridge that gap. Um, I'm curious, Sabrina. For some reason, I felt Pluto in the conversation with us, and I know you've worked deeply with Pluto. So I'm really curious to hear about how your relationship with Pluto has helped you or has played a role in you deepening into your embodiment.
I want to comment as well on what you said about like life not working, and that's why we go to astrology,
Mm,
which definitely I found astrology as a kid and I was really like, whoa, this is so real. People seem like they're sun signs. Why is no one talking about this?
mm,
But my deepening into astrology definitely did happen inside of crisis
mm.
points.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there will be a future of astrology inside of its popularity. I'm not sure, where people learn it for this way that it just opens up the animistic universe. Like it can be so provocative in these ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get it. We go to it when we feel alienated, and it is a way of kind of finding our way back
Mm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
And then Pluto. Yeah, Pluto is really at the root of my practice, because I started with evolutionary astrology, and that's what I teach, and that's what I've really devoted myself to continuing to teach and
Mm.
continuing to deepen. I just think Pluto is really generative as a frame for so many things infinitely. Like
Right.
Pluto being nature itself and the deeper pulse inside of nature. So, starting with like, we could use the Big Bang as an image and the way that there was just this immense creative energy that rippled into this time still, like 13 billion years later. And there were all these processes. And a lot of this is philosophically inspired by Brian Swim, one of my professors at California Institute of Integral Studies.
Mm.
But he told the universe story where the forces that created the universe, that started to develop planets, that started to develop single-celled organisms, that started to develop like multi-cell organisms and the process of procreation,
Mm.
that energy still lives inside of us. And when we feel desire for another person, when we're turned on and we want to merge with someone, that we're actually experiencing a 13 billion year process through our
Wow.
bodies. And
Mm.
that's why it's so intense for all of us, or for a lot of us. Like, it's not just personal. There are
Yeah.
layers of it that are personal, but it's like there's this deeper thing beneath it. And Pluto, even that image, is like the tip of the iceberg, and there's this whole thing underneath it.
Mm. Mm.
So, understanding that our desire nature or our soul, that consciously we kind of came into this incarnation several years into existing because we weren't fully conscious from birth. So,
Yeah.
we just kind of awaken subtly into
Mm.
being here without remembering our prior lives or who we are as a soul.
Mm.
And that the kind of like game of this existence doesn't require us to remember who we were before this. And some people aren't interested in finding out who they were before this. It's
Yeah.
like creepy or spooky, or they're more kind of like invested in just this life.
Mm.
But Pluto is like this deeper soul current that's running through us that is an extension of the universe itself.
Right.
And that it's really hard for us to grapple with it because it's like it's steamy, like it's our impulses, our desires that don't always align with who we think we are.
Mm.
It doesn't always align with what's convenient. It doesn't always align with like civilization or social norms. Right? And that's a fair enough negotiation. It's not like we're just doing whatever we feel like all of the time. Like, we are social creatures. But I think really working with Pluto, it starts out as like, okay, who's my soul? Like, who am I at a soul level? But I think at a micro daily level with Pluto, it's like getting into right relationship with the energy current that lives in our bodies and is our impulsive or instinctual nature, where we'll just kind of have these waves that come over us. Like, I live with this because it's my thing that I'm devoted to and like work with and cultivate. But it's like that wave that told me to move to Crete, the
Mm.
wave that told me to write an autobiographical erotic novel and like publish it as I go on my podcast.
Mm.
Like, these different waves that I'm always feeling that guide me.
Mm.
Not that they always are perfect for me, not that they don't sometimes get me into situations or something like that, but it's me living my life,
Mm.
basically. And I
Yeah.
think that we get really dulled, deadened, depressed when we have gotten into patterns for a long time of stifling our soul and stifling our erotic, alive energy through codependency with culture, through, being too engaged in our false self or our masks or these survival mechanisms, our ego, like all of that, all of those layers. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think Pluto you can get to know in like um, in a chart what it's saying, but I think playing with the energy of Pluto every day is like this deeper, like what's really going on underneath this.
Hmm.
And I think it's funny that within all of this, it's like I'm not like gothic, I'm not macabre, I'm not morose. Like I I do have the ability to like go there to some extent, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not about living in the underworld or being like, in decay or death process all the time. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's just part of the cycle of nature. I
Yeah.
think Pluto is really about all of the processes of nature and like the richness, the fertility. Like Pluto means riches. And so if you think about like a thriving garden or ecosystem and that cycle of life and death, as
Yeah.
well as our own desire nature, that cycle of moving towards something, having the experience, experiencing it fully, letting it go for whatever reason we have to let it go, and then new life happens again. And it's just so easy at an egoic human level to not do the cycle, to like get
Yes.
stuck in parts of it.
Yes. Yes. The word that came to my mind as you were speaking is alchemy. And I was also really attracted to what you said about stifling because sometimes the way we see ourselves or other people use a tool like astrology or even literally any tools comes from that stifling posture, right? Because we are so used to interacting with life itself from that stifled place, we bring that posture into our craft, right? And in bringing that posture, we kind of lock the craft into something that maybe is not even what it's even for, you know? I want to talk about the nervous system with you, Sabrina, because earlier before we recorded, you brought um, the thematics of Aquarius, and I know you've been in deep contemplation of the fixed signs for a number of years. And yeah, I'm curious to hear about emotions, creativity, aliveness, EFT from the perspective of Aquarius.
Yeah, I just have to say too, I'm like feeling the energy that I've been in this conversation about, and you're literally asking me about my favorite fucking things to think about and like my favorite things in the world. So of course I'm like foaming at the mouth with excitement. Um, but yeah, the nervous system, yeah, with embodiment, I've just been kind of thinking about how Aquarius, I don't know what the stereotypes are about Aquarius at this point. Like, what do people think about Aquarius? Do they think that they're avoidant, attached, that they have avoidant
Mm,
attachment, that
mhm.
they're prone to dissociation, that they're kind of aliens or something like that?
Yeah.
Um, and that they're like geniuses and weirdos. Anything else that you can think of that's like, what do people generally at a
Yeah.
layperson, high level think about Aquarius?
Great question. Visionary, I think, is also a word I've seen associated with Aquarius energy, or like forward thinking, future, eccentric. You know, what comes to mind in this moment, there was this meme that went around with where Paris Hilton was talking about children's rights. I think it was she was speaking in front of Congress or something like that, and somebody mentioned something about her outfit, and she was just in her bubbly Paris Hilton manner, and then she made this left turn and suddenly was so serious as this like human rights activist, and that to me is also showing kind of the range of Aquarius. We know Paris Hilton is a Aquarius sun, and there's kind of a quality about Aquariuses that I think is really rooted in their own convictions, of like this is the world we want to see, and oftentimes it is informed by their trauma or their unpleasant experiences that they've experienced, right? And yeah, there's something kind of transmutational too, I think, about the energy of Aquarius, where it's like I know what it's like to have experienced being oppressed or not being able to express myself, and now I'm going to change the system so that the system can allow other people to access a state that I wasn't able to access when I was feeling oppressed or repressed.
That was beautiful. Is Paris Hilton an Aquarius sun?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that was like so poetic. And I love to like, I think that there's this tendency to dehumanize celebrities. And I think more often than not, celebrities are incredibly impressive people.
Mm,
We do see like a part of them or like a curated, which is they have so many eyes on them. Of course, they have a private life or whatnot. But I
yeah.
think, um, yeah, I just respect the nervous system experience of having that many eyes on you. I think they're impressive with what they're doing, what they've created. Um, and yeah, dealing with a world that loves and hates them.
Mm,
But with Aquarius, all of the like this kind of intellectual aspect or understanding systems or like being so, yeah, activist or wanting to like change the world, a lot of those things, there can seem like there's this like up and out quality or it's like buzzing. It's like not really like grounded, so to say.
mhm,
And I don't think that's the experience for every Aquarian. I think also like the charge or the electricity or the shock that Aquarians experience from, from the Hellenistic point of view, the more like Saturnian side where they're like on the outside or on the outskirts. So this basic trauma level of not being in the middle, feeling like excluded,
mm,
like dealing with that. Or the Uranian modern version of Aquarius that is explicitly about trauma.
mhm,
Um, there is a process with Aquarius of making connections that sometimes just have taken a lot longer to make, and the distance that has been traveled is so much farther. It's this really incredible experience of like every person that's ever felt like alone for years at a time, but like held a dream or held a vision, and then it somehow materializes, and you're like, wait, I was wanting this. This was what I felt I was missing. This was a missing link for me. And like 10 years later, I'm living it. That
yeah.
feels like a signal sent across the globe that instead of being like an instant telephone call, took like 10 years to
Yeah.
happen. And
Yeah.
so I think like with Aquarius, there's that sense of deep space.
Mm,
And at the same time, I've been really reflecting lately on how connected Aquarius actually is to embodiment and aliveness. The ability to bring your attention and witness consciousness to sensations in the body and be present with
mhm,
feelings
mhm,
is already really intense. It's like intense kind of in a scorpionic way, but for anyone that's like really comfortable moving fast, I think you made a post about this, like this concept. If you're
yeah.
comfortable moving fast, then slowing down feels really intense. It's like
Mhm,
high sensation.
yeah.
If you're someone that likes to move slow, then going fast might be really high sensation. So
Yeah.
it's personal, whatever the thing is. But I think that Aquarius is that like buzzing electricity that happens at the edge or beyond the edge of our known world.
Mm,
And
mhm,
that if we're not used to cultivating a relationship with our sexual life force or feeling into the subtle energy of our heart, like the signal might not be strong at first, or it might be too much for us to stay present or awake without like dissociating subtly. But with practice, I think the signal can grow louder. And then
yeah.
it's like, what do we do with this big signal that's coming through? Like it brings
Mm,
in that question of the other fixed signs and like how we invest energy. And
mhm,
personally, I've been really having this experience of um, I'm doing these experiments of going outside and create. It's so beautiful here. Like this land is amazing, but just like going outside and creating energetic meditations and journeys with the
mm,
sun or with
mm,
the water or like with
mhm,
any element that I want to talk to and like practicing like not just like feeling present with the sunlight on my skin, but like sending it to different energy centers or like swirling around like electric sunlight through my cells, like just coming up with these different conversations, novel
Right.
conversations with the sun or with the elements. And like this is Aquarian. Like
Mm.
I'm getting freaky out here. I'm like having sex with the world and either no one's around or like no one would be able to tell per se, or like maybe just the right people. Because what's cool is like after connecting with the elements, no one bothers me. Like,
Mm.
really, people don't bother me. Like, I
Yeah.
have like some kind of Saturn Aquarius thing going on, but it's like the people that come up to me or the people that I interact with after these experiences are like the right people. Like,
Mm.
I think that, plants, like people who have connection with herbs, tobacco is also a really powerful plant, but it's like these plant spirits connect people. And I think with Aquarius, it is like the non-human realm. It is also human connections and networking and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so, from an embodiment perspective, I think that being focused on humans too much, like getting
Mm.
stuck in like the human grid,
Mm.
it's cool to be connected to people and also like people are, have their traumas or their limitations, or there's like codependent threads that can happen. And I think that Aquarius can be really, like, even if an Aquarian is in a monogamous relationship, or we're engaging this kind of Aquarius archetype and we're in a monogamous relationship, we might still have like this massive network with the sun and with these plants and like
Right.
with the community. Like, there's all of these threads happening. And I think that from an embodiment and an aliveness perspective, it's this journey of coming out of isolation, whether by trauma, self-imposed, habitual, egoic, and being able to become part of the web of things again,
Mm.
to, feel the food that we're eating, to like feel the outdoors, like, and at a deeper level of creativity within it, to be able to play with and direct energy,
Yeah.
because if you open yourself to be an antenna for like all of the subtle energy in the universe, like people are going to shut down immediately,
Yeah.
like, get overwhelmed or feel like, yeah, just this avalanche of energy. And so
Mm.
I think Aquarius is this, it's an irrigation system with Saturn.
Mm.
It is
Mm-hmm.
about how energy is channeled.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people cut themselves off from this deeper reception that's possible within the Aquarius archetype because of no education about it, because it's super uncomfortable and like weird, and
Mm.
because it's a practice and a skill basically to learn how to direct the energy, like how to work with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's such a rich um deepening into Aquarius and embodiment. And I'm thinking about what you said
And I'm
around,
curious for you, by the way, because you have
yeah,
Aquarius planets and like
I
you
do.
are really like super, like when I've done meditations or like guided meditations with you, they're so powerful, so
Mm.
gentle, so precise. Like there
Mm.
is like this energetic awareness. Um, and I really do think that's part of embodiment. It's not
Yeah.
just an air element thing.
Yeah. Thank you for that reflection. Yeah. I think for me, I'm thinking about what you said about uncomfortable and weird. And the Aquarian consciousness can get stuck in this idea of like, ooh, something I'm experiencing or perceiving is weird, but that's by definition always in reference to something else we learn, right? Like that's always in reference to a conditioning or, as you mentioned, kind of the social grid that we exist within. But if you go a layer deeper, true connection, whether that be with another human or with the non human, requires us to get out of the grid, right? Because the signals that are being sent back and forth between two beings who are in communion with one another is held within the context of the web of life, right? And the context of that web of life is not something that can be pinned down by like human conceptions. And so, if we want deeper connections with other people or with life, I think it does require us at some point to step out of what we've been taught. You know, a lot of people step out, but then they are in resistance to the human story. And that resistance to me actually creates like what you resist, you become, right? So when you are resisting it, you are not allowing whatever's coming up to come up, right? And I think when we are talking about energy, Sabrina, what's so profound to me about the experience of learning more deeply about energy is it continues to show me how the reality of being alive is you can't lie. Like there is no such thing as a lie. You can lie with your words, you can lie with in the mental space, but energetically we never really lie. Like there's kind of a naked truth to our being. And um allowing ourselves to step away from the rigidity of the mental model, but without resisting it, that to me is kind of like the skill that energy work can really help us get into if we engage with it in a way that actually expands rather than contracts. Because I think, again, the tools that we are given, right, whatever the tools are, astrology, energy work, EFT, we can perpetuate the stifling that you were mentioning earlier, right? Using the tools. Like you can lock yourself deeper into the prison of that stifling conditioning, or you can use it to liberate yourself to get out of the stifling. And I think it takes a lot of skill and a lot of awareness actually, and also maybe even compassion for ourselves and the unraveling out of that shame pattern that we sometimes have when the awareness comes, right? To tie this back to the experience I had with you in that session, I think what was so amazing was experiencing in my body what it feels like to have the sensations come up and not feel any shame around it, you know? And like be with the rawness of that experience rather than trying to, yeah, trying to make sense of it.
Wow, yeah, I'm hearing like it's almost kind of this Pluto and Aquarius thing of basically the this like prison concept or like,
Yeah.
a grid,
Mm.
a paradigm that is
Mhm.
either a trap
Mhm.
or something that's more expansive or like holds possibility.
Mhm.
And I think that when it comes to like nervous system transformation or shadow work and whatnot, or transmuting shame, that we have a personal paradigm of how we move through the world
Mhm.
where, some people's paradigm has more space to be iconoclastic or to ruffle people's feathers or to be, weird. Like some people even get turned on by that type of attention or being like, set apart from the crowd.
Yeah.
Whereas another person's nervous system might go into like deep, unbearable sensations if they step out of line like
Mm.
that.
Mhm.
And from a soul perspective, the question becomes like, is there energy, available energy that's been wanting to come through our lives that is actually trying to dismantle some of that grid that
Mm.
we have?
Mhm.
Um, a true calling, the call to adventure, like in the Joseph Campbell, like I'm pretty sure that there's a part of that model that involves resistance.
Mhm.
Like there's the initial call to adventure, and like the hero's like, oh fuck, I don't want to do that. Like
Yeah.
that would fuck up my whole life. Like, but then it kind of ferments and brews a bit, and then the hero's like, actually, you know, I'm
Mm.
down, or
Yeah.
their life starts to um it would be kind of like in a story or something where like the hero gets an invitation to like enter a totally new world and they're like, oh, but my community, like I don't want to leave them. And then
Mm.
next scene, they have some kind of big blowout fight with the community and they're like, well, I guess everything is pointing me toward the big adventure that I was a no to. So it's like
Mm.
events will conspire
Yeah.
to start to move us toward that direction of energy.
Mm.
And yeah, we can continue to resist it or stifle it, or we can go with it.
Yeah.
If we're stifling it, we're basically trying to like push life back into the ground and we're like
Mm.
not wanting to start at all.
Yeah.
If we go along with it, it's still going to be super confrontational because then we're going to meet the parts of ourselves that are so resistant.
Yeah.
And I think that what I've been learning with embodiment things and EFT and whatnot is that it doesn't work like at the deepest level to just force past our defense mechanisms.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see this in myself because, and everyone does this, where it's like you're upset about something and then a voice comes up and it's like, you should get over it.
Mm.
And then you put yourself in a situation that's triggering for you emotionally and just expect yourself not to be bothered by it because you're like, come on, like toughen up,
Yeah.
do the hard thing.
Yeah.
And while, in some sense that's reasonable, like we learn that skill of being able to be with discomfort. And I think of like public school growing up. Like I had to face situations every day at certain points that I didn't want to be with.
Mm.
Whereas now I have so much freedom about where I go, when I go, that I could avoid things if I want to, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's like being with, okay, like you want to transform some of your resistance. You can't just force yourself to transform it.
Mm.
There's like a whole process, there's a whole inner government, there's all these mechanisms, there's all these inner parts that are managing or dealing with that situation. And like an example could be like these protective mechanisms, like say like an inner critic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the fear, the kind of like energy in life is maybe, you know, the humiliation or something, like just
Mm-hmm.
dealing with consequences of things not going well. And like that's super energizes an experience. It creates heat in the body, the face flushes, it's like you're squirming inside. And so if you have a part of you that's like, cool, I never want to feel humiliated because being humiliated means I'm bad. It's so
Mm.
embarrassing. It makes me want to die. Like snowballing what it is and being so resistant to it that a part of us develops that's like, okay, how do I be cool? How do I
Mm.
like act in a certain way that prevents me from being humiliated?
Yeah.
So opportunities come up to maybe take a creative risk, or we don't even notice those opportunities or allow ourselves to feel it because that would equal embarrassment and humiliation.
Mm.
But this kind of process within de-armoring that of like, I had a whole process with humiliation myself, just like contemplating it and starting to notice in TV shows like I really love the one Never Have I Ever, but I feel like Davy, the main character, like she got herself into embarrassing situations all the time. And
Yeah.
I would see her kind of like be rattled by it after and be like, ouch, that hurt. But then she would like get back up and throw herself into life again. And I was like, yeah, like you can be embarrassed and you can move on.
Yeah.
There's even like there's an eros to it. For some people, it can be a whole kink. Like it is
Mm.
part of a kinky like framework to be embarrassed.
Yeah.
But the energy itself is just like, I feel exposed, and I'm like in the heat of that exposure. And so I practice with basically like, okay, every time my ego is embarrassed,
Mm.
because it's my ego, it's my personality, it's my self concept,
Yeah.
where something popped out of me, like my being, my expression that doesn't fit in this very tight, closed, rigid part of my personality. And
Mm.
something broke past it. And now that rigid guard that's like, wait, you were supposed to not be weird like that. You were supposed to like stay in line. So there's this punishment, there's this shame that comes up after where
Yeah.
the self critic is like berating the part of us that feels humiliated and
Mm.
how essentially that part that is being critical is like scared and just needs to feel safe and
Yeah.
like, is acting all tough and whatnot, but is just scared. And then the
Yeah.
part of us that's humiliated also just has to like learn how to feel safe inside of
Mm.
that sensation. And
Right.
then if both of them can just have that experience, they don't have to be in this like tight, entrenched battle with each other
Right.
anymore.
Right.
And, then we gain the capacity to take risks, to make mistakes, to try new things, and to have more resilience after, quote, failures.
Yeah.
And that's all, some of that's conceptual. And the conceptual, I think, gives so much grounding to the part of us that's flailing in the moment. But it
Hmm.
is so embodied also because it's just learning how to expand inside of sensations that our mind previously was so allergic to and developed defenses around.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. You're making me think about a point of conversation that we've been returning to, Sabrina, which is this idea of opening to our sensitivity to life. Because so many of us are pretty, I would say probably all of us are pretty intuitive. We are human beings. I don't subscribe to this idea that the intuitive is this rare breed of human. I think that we are all intuitive in some way, shape, or form. And I also think that part of the sensitivity that we have is part of our evolutionary feature. Like that we've evolved to have these sensitivities in order to survive, right? And to get to this point. And when you were talking about like this experience of being humiliated, I I'm reminded of how often for me personally, when I look at that experience from an energetic level, what I often see is also that when I am not allowing myself to feel my sensitivity, I actually ended up unconsciously taking in the energy or the thought forms of other people who maybe saw me in that moment and had a reaction, right? Um, Maybe caretakers when I was little, or maybe like my friend or my partner who was kind of concerned when they saw me, right? And it's almost like paradoxically, I think when we um, increase or we skillfully learn to become more embracing of our sensitive nature, we are more able to discern and to see what is truly our feelings, right? Because a lot of the times when we're doing something driven by desire and it doesn't yield the outcome we hope, there's actually so much learning from that experience, and it actually, even though that might look like failure because we don't immediately get what we expect, what I see is like we have this concept, right, of like, if I do this, then I'm going to get this. But reality is showing us that maybe the timeline needs to be a little bit extended, right? That yes, the desire is already within you. It's part of you. It's part of what reality is wanting to show you. You just have to be in this negotiation and relationship with reality, right? And I think for me, what's been helpful in my own journey in opening to my sensitivity is like really discerning, like, is that even mine? Like when I'm feeling that shame or when I'm feeling that embarrassment from what feels like an epic failure, like whose feelings are those? Because sometimes they're really not mine. Other times they are mine or they come from my conditioning. But even when it comes from like a previous version of me, that's not who I am right now. There's like this, we're such multidimensional beings that it's like, okay, is this Jonathan, the 15-year-old Jonathan that's really activated, or is this the 35-year-old Jonathan? Because they're not the same, you know? Um, yeah. What do you think about that?
I think that shame is a pretty social emotion.
Yeah.
And usually, like when we're, yeah, having an inner critic or shame or something, there is, there's often like a figure that we've also attached to it, whether it's a parent or someone that we've felt criticized by, and they kind of become an inner voice because
Mm,
we're like criticizing ourselves through their voice or something like that.
yeah.
And I think it's really tricky because it resonates with something within us.
Hmm.
Um, so it is personal.
Yeah.
And it's also like we've been entangled with another person, or
Mm,
it's the family that we came into. And I think that sometimes with these processes of of embracing those sensations, there can be this forgiveness process of, um, and it's a deeper, it's not just the intellectual, because people, we have this intellectually where we understand, there's the phase of being like mad at our parents for like how they failed us or something like that. And then this intellectual maturation of understanding why our parents had the vulnerabilities or flaws that they had because of
Yeah.
their upbringing and their culture and our lineage and all of that. And
Mm.
so then we learn to mentally take them off the hook
Mm.
from that blame or
Mhm.
whatnot.
Mhm.
But then it's just still there at some deeper level. And I think that moving into a self intimacy, self holding with these like shadow shame elements can involve forgiving ourselves and then also forgiving all the people that have been looped into it, the people that we got it from, the people, and
Yeah.
it's really gritty. It's really intense.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, there is a level, it's like that Saturnian inner element or that like internalized superego is about belonging and safety. And culture does this in a tribal way where it's like
Yeah.
there's a cultural grid about like how to be okay.
Mm.
And at an embodiment level, it's really threatening, I think, to the mammal body to just like break those cultural bonds.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think there's a deep, yeah. And when it comes to like individuation or even the Aquarian impulse to like, go one's own way, whether that looks like rebelling from something or just not doing the same thing as everyone else,
Mm.
it really does challenge that mammalian loyalty. Um,
Mm.
yeah. I
Yeah.
also like, I had this breakthrough in therapy because I was, um, yeah, talking about something and the therapist was like told me about the mammalian like loyalty concept. And it blew my mind because I was so, I felt that like even just thinking negatively or like noticing the flaws about someone too in depth was like what if I'm hexing them? Like what if
Mm.
my negative vision is like that damaging? And he was
Yeah.
like, no, like that mammalian bond is so deep that you don't even want to think negatively of where you come from or negatively of family members. Like
Mm.
um, people have this all the time in a subtle form where there's actually like such a strong like rage
Mm.
that many people might have from the ways that they were suppressed
Yeah.
in childhood,
Yeah.
even if it was really benign. And actually, the rage is probably more suppressed if it was benign because it's like,
Mm.
how can I be? My parents were doing the best that they could. Like,
Right.
there's this part that tries to be reasonable and tries to be compassionate. And then that rage just goes into shadow because we've rationalized, or excused it.
Yeah.
And it's realizing that you can feel that rage without hurting anyone. But people will not even want to go there. Like it seems like
Mm.
more reasonable to leave the rage like somewhere deep down and continue to show up and be a good person, be a good family member.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like it's delicate stuff.
Mm.
Uncorking that rage or like uncorking whatever we've put into the shadow is like not easy to do.
Mm.
There's support even on uncorking it, and then there's support in learning how to live with all that energy that comes out from it
Yeah.
and not, going totally berserk
Yeah.
and misusing the energy too.
Wow. Yeah. This is why I'm so passionate about working with Mars because there's a quality around what it means to actually work with fear rather than like contemplating fear because I think there's two sides to it, right? And a lot of the times when we fear our own aggressive nature, part of it is because we haven't put ourselves over the edge to see where that takes us, right? And it's obviously there's another side to this too where there are people who really have problems with controlling their impulses. Now that's a different story, but I think what we're talking about here is like the context of like repressing that raw energy that wants to move through us, right? And I'm curious to hear if you have any thoughts around, yeah, if someone's listening to this and they're like, yeah, that sounds really scary. Like I am aware that the rage is there. How do I work with this really raw primal energy that I'm feeling that I don't seem to know how to channel into an appropriate container in my life?
Yeah, this one it's still kind of in process for me.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I've been really like noticing that, when it came to, you know, this EFT training and realizing like, oh, anything that I learned to accept or be within myself, like that's real empathy and that's going to be transformative and allow me to like connect with people in their experience.
yeah,
Anger and rage was one of the ones where I was like, ooh, like that is really an edge for me.
yeah.
And so what I've noticed, um, I've been in connection with people about it.
Mm,
Like I've practiced like learning how to express it
mm,
more, or just even noticing like aggression as an energy, like how and when it serves me, and how I have Venus on the ascendant, it trines my moon in Taurus. So I'm actually like I'm kind of sweet, I think.
mm,
If I don't say so myself, but like I like having immediate access to aggression so
mm,
that if someone asks me a question I don't feel like answering, I don't find myself just being like obedient and going along with how another person's directing my energy with a question and being like, actually, like, no, fuck you. I don't want to answer that. Like,
mm,
or like being here in Greece, like, there's so many more opportunities where being difficult or being aggressive actually helps me get things done or get my way, like as
mm.
a cultural thing
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And yeah, I think, and people here are super friendly and fun and whatnot. It's just like when you interact with like, yeah, basic situations that would be really seamless and follow procedures in the States, like here, you put a little bit more muscle into it and you get what you want. So,
Mm,
like, I think that I've been noticing just bringing my attention to moments where I had something simmering underneath the surface, and feeling into the play and the fun of actually advocating for myself and standing up for myself in the moment.
yes.
And there is a messiness sometimes where it's like if that's really unfamiliar, sometimes it comes out in this like weird way in relationships that doesn't exactly go as you would have hoped, or yeah, like your conflict skills aren't that great yet. And so people are like, what? When you bring up conflict and it feels
Mm,
discouraging, it's like, well, I should just go back to keeping things like underneath the surface then. And it's like, no, just it's gonna be messy. There's like an ugly duckling process, but I think
mhm,
also having safe people that are not directly part of the conflict, like mentors, or like when I've been getting EFT sessions from different, like either the students that I'm trading with or different practitioners, it's been incredible to work through anger with them.
mm, mhm,
Yeah, I had this like acupuncture session. I went to Athens for the day just to get acupuncture. I like
mhm,
intuitively was like, I got to go to this guy. But like, uh, I felt basically I was going through all sorts of things, including that I was just so mad all of the time. Like I was having this like wave of rage that was
mhm.
like really weird for me to be with.
Yeah.
So I went to go get this acupuncture session to not like make the anger go away, but just like help me digest this because I'm like on fire and this is. But
Mm,
he put some needles in and like went away. And at a certain point, I was like, this isn't intense enough. I'm not feeling enough. But I like called him.
yeah.
I like literally thought while I was sitting on the table, I was like, I'm gonna be so distraught if I leave Athens. I flew here for the day for this acupuncture session. If I don't like actually make the most of being here so then I called him over and I was like, I'm still so pissed and I hardly feel anything. Like, please give me more needles. And he was like, oh, I thought you said you were like really sensitive, so I was going easy on you. And I was like, I'm in a fucking crisis. Like, I
Mm.
need more needles. Like, I just, I didn't say it exactly that way, but it was just like fun to wake up inside of, oh, I'm being kind of difficult. Like I'm not
Yeah.
being convenient. I'm not
Mm.
I'm not afraid of offending him. I'm not
Yeah.
even in conflict with him. I just called
Yeah.
him over to be like, I don't feel anything and I'm still mad. Like,
Right.
can you take this treatment a level deeper?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that with Mars and like with anger, it's just realizing that if anger has been suppressed, there's probably an onslaught of situations in one's life where there's a need underneath the surface that is never being communicated.
Yeah.
And to begin to communicate those needs is going to feel super awkward, super messy. I remember being in my 20s and like always hearing that, like, oh, women get confident in their 30s. They have this like sexual awakening in their 40s. Like, there's this whole like, I'm like, I think part of this is happening now just from being okay, being like somewhat difficult.
Mm.
Like, I'm still actually like nice and kind. I'm not degrading people. I'm not like pushing boundaries in some abusive way, but
Yeah.
I'm literally just not trying to be docile and like non-offensive all the time.
Yeah.
And it's super fucking thrilling and fun. It's like very Martian to like
Yeah.
have those moments of like, well, yep, I'm being difficult.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing right now.
Yeah. 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 Ooh, as you're speaking, Sabrina, I get full body chills, and it's making me think about kind of this cult of reasonableness that we've created for one another that can really get in the way of authentic expressions and creativity, and um yeah, I
I
guess
love
what
that
I'm
phrase.
yeah, cult of reasonableness. Yeah, I mean, I've been moving through various versions of this within myself because especially I'm kind of looping us full circle here because something you mentioned earlier in the conversation is how you weren't just interested in kind of learning astrology for yourself, but what I'm hearing is actually like build a life sustaining art project out of your astrology practice. And that doesn't always fall within the cult of reasonableness. The cult of reasonableness is like get a job, a 9 to 5, right? And act in a certain kind of way so that you are fitting in, and there's a promise of safety, but actually there's no real guarantee of it out of that cult of reasonableness. I think the reason why I brought up the thing about practice, Serena, is um what you were just saying is making me think about like how there are actually resources, right, that we can tap into to work with this aggression, to work with this more primal energy in a way that feels okay for a system. And I think sometimes like it just takes time and it takes like exploration, you know? Because what I'm hearing you're sharing here is your willingness to continue to explore or kind of I'm getting an imagery here of like coming to the edge of the lake of that primal energy, right? And like continually come back to it and maybe sometimes even bringing in a trusted processor to look at that lake together and be like, hold me while I'm, fainting by the side of the
Yeah,
lake, right? Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I mean, back to what you said about how energy doesn't lie.
Mm,
I think that when we don't want to be with certain parts of ourselves, and it is, there are like people do compartmentalize. We compartmentalize or like things aren't available for certain period, like we're not ready to unpack certain things at certain times. So I'm not advocating for like an aggressive self-mining of raw energy and just like
yeah.
abusing ourselves through that kind of digging because that can get really out of hand.
Yes.
But it's being aware with like what is coming up, what's emergent for me to process. Where am I continually like running into some kind of allergic response within myself and within life? What am I resisting right now?
Mm,
Versus like that intelligence of the actual, rest and restoration that we need, the actual time that we need to not be like digging things up or just recognizing there might be a layer where it's like, actually, I can't go there
Mm.
now, or I need a container to go
Yeah.
there. I can't just like open it. Um, and I think that it's actually being in a more sensitive and more consistent inquiry of that.
Mm.
Um, because I think for a lot of culture, like maybe the agreement is about a continued repression of something.
Yeah.
Like there's never any space to unpack it and it's
Mm.
never going to be convenient. Um, and I think of that, I think I've had moments too where I've asked people like, can you deal with that part of yourself? Or like, do you want to open that? Like, would you be okay if you opened it? And people just being like, actually, no. I
Mm.
I always want to keep that away.
Yeah.
And um yeah, I'm kind of, I think there's a time and a place, but I think
Mm.
it involves being honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, about why we're resisting something. And, if we are in patterns of resistance or if we're locking our life force away, it creates a whole other web of patterns of like how we're trying to get energy to feed ourselves with. So
Mm. Mm-hmm.
addictions or kind of like junk food type behaviors
Yeah.
show up because we're trying to like scratch an itch or like get a hit of life.
Mm.
And we're looking for it out there. But
Yeah.
sometimes if we just like opened up some more availability within ourselves by being with stuff that we're resisting,
Mm.
it would sensitize us to resources and other resources we haven't even been aware of yet, other ways to connect with life.
Yeah. 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 I want to wind us to a close here. Um, I'm curious to kind of come back to a question I had for you, Sabrina, which is around being an astrologer, being someone who's deep in the practice of looking at planetary movements, which can seem very abstract, right? Any advice you might have for folks listening, or even to your younger self, around how to more deeply be with our human experience as we do that act of looking at planetary movements?
Hmm. I guess holding in mind that any planetary expression is relatively infinite.
Mm.
So don't box it in like it's going to express in this exact way, like understanding that it is a mystery. And
Yeah.
that if you get to know new layers of yourself or open to new layers of yourself, you will also open to new layers of astrology.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this kind of infinity loop between the astrology and our own development.
Mm.
And the reality, too, that when we contact astrological information that um, provokes us, stirs us, like opens up new possibility, that we can actually start to see new pathways into ourselves and into our lives. And maybe we take that leap, whether we are doing that so consciously or in connection to what we opened up through the astrology, but it expands our life. And then with that expanded life, when we look back at the astrological symbols, they also open.
Mm.
So I think it's like really keeping in mind that there's that infinity loop there
Yeah.
and that can create an enriched astrology practice and also an enriched life.
Mm.
And that if you collapse either of those, like you collapse your own development and start to limit the astrology, or you collapse the astrology and limit, where you can go yourself, then you cut off that flow.
Yeah.
So I think just like playing with and also recognizing too that like if you're looking at problems in the chart, if you're looking at astrological problems or like this is what's scary, this is what sucks, this is what's bad about this placement, you might be onto something. Like there are negative aspects of all the placements. There's positive and negative.
Yeah.
So if you can locate those negative ones, start to use your creative mind to imagine a bridge to a better possibility
Mm.
and start to imagine what creates, that bridge. Like, for example, Moon Pluto aspects relate to like some profound transformation around attachment stuff, or maybe some, yeah, abandonment fears or something like that.
Mm.
And it's like, that's a concept. But the work of actually shifting a person's relationship to abandonment or attachment trauma is like deep and years long. And it's
Yeah.
like recognizing that that concept can actually take you on a whole long-term journey
Mm.
and that, to not underestimate that,
Yeah.
that like these placements aren't static. They represent deep, profound, multi-year processes and
Mm.
that you can play with that. So just don't limit your interpretations of placements. If you do see some negative things or issues with it, like um, give yourself a break if it creates like despair or fear that's like so debilitating.
Mm.
But then if you can come to it from a place of more creative resource or possibility, how might you resource that placement's issues?
Yeah.
Yeah, and feel free to take a break from problems sometimes and
Mm.
like play with what's going to bring you joy, what's going to, also helping people, being in service, like
Mm.
creating, like all of these things take us out of our preoccupation with our own wounding.
Yeah.
Like it lets us, stop navel gazing, if you will, and just like go get out in the world or like go be part of something. And then come back to these astrological placements
Mm.
and see what happens. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think also whenever we create, share, serve, I think it creates an energetic funnel where the universe gives us more too.
Mm.
So realizing that as well, where it's like, what do you have to offer? What do you have to create? How can you like play or like bring something to the table in life? Don't get so preoccupied with thinking that you don't have enough or that you're not good enough.
Mm.
Like start with what you have,
Yeah.
and notice that your world will get bigger and your
Mm.
conception of astrology will also get bigger.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You're making me think about how astrology is not just seeing the planet or the planetary movements objectively, right? But there's an element here too of like recognizing you as the observer put on your lens to astrology, and how can you continue to become aware of that lens and allow your growth as a human being to continue to refine and inform how you relate to astrology. Yeah. Mhm. Um,
Exactly.
where can people find you, Sabrina? Are there ways that people can work with you? What are you currently offering?
The next evolutionary astrology intensive, which is the way to like learn the whole kind of paradigm of evolutionary astrology, the archetypes, how to put them together to read whole natal charts, including your own and other people's. That is coming up again May 6th, 2025, and is currently open for applications. Um, that is also, it'll be like my 16th time teaching it. So chances are I
Wow.
will keep teaching it. But still, like, if you're feeling the call, join. It's really, yeah, I wanted to create a way for people to have a relationship to astrology. And that's my container for that. It's a 5-month all levels program. I'm also doing Eros and Aliveness consults that are looking at the astrology chart from Eros and the fixed signs and this question of aliveness. I do one-to-one coaching work. Um, I teach advanced programs for alumni of the Evolutionary Astrology Intensive. There's my mailing list, Magic of the Spheres podcast, Sabrina Monarch on YouTube. It's yeah, I'm kind of out there. If you follow me on any of those channels, you'll find your way. I
Cool.
would suggest getting on the mailing list.
Amazing. All right. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your wisdom. I just always really appreciate you so deeply.
Jonathan, thank you so much. I had so much fun and thank you for these like really inviting, like deeply explorative questions. It was such a treat and a gift.
Mm.